from Michigan, and I spent a couple summers in northern Michigan, and I fell in love with the outdoors, and I decided I just had to pick an outdoor job. So I asked my teacher what she thought I could do, and she said, "You're going to be a park ranger." So I started applying to jobs, and I interned at Glacier National Park, and then I came out here a year after that, and I haven't wanted to leave since. So that's why I wanted to be a park ranger, because I love the outdoors and I love sharing that experience with others and getting other people excited about the outdoors.
Well, before you became the guide, what kind of subjects or the items you have to study?
I studied outdoor and environmental recreation and earth science, but you can study anything to be a ranger. We have historians, we have English majors in college that come here, so you just have to have a passion for it.
Well, thank you very much.
No problem.
Good. I'm Ranger Rachel. I'm your guide today. This is my second season in Yosemite, and I love it. It's amazing. I'll tell you more about myself later in the tour, but basically our tour is 2 hours long today. We'll have 2 stops. At the first stop, we'll empty you out, we'll have a restroom break. At the second stop, we'll fill you back up, we'll have water available for you. If that sounds backwards, that's just how we work here in Yosemite. If you got any of those hats with the strings on them, you may want to pull the strings in the front and pull them tight. If not, hold on to your hats, because we will be driving at whopping speeds of 25 miles per hour. I know that doesn't sound very fast, but it is fast enough to knock the hats right off of your heads, and we cannot stop the vehicle for any loose objects lost. So cell phones, cameras, water bottles, selfie sticks. If you lose any of these things, you're going to have to go back and get them later. And I can almost guarantee they're going to have a lot more character than when we started today. Sometimes children can qualify as loose objects. We would stop the tram for a child. But if you do not think you can keep yourself, Sam is the most important person, because he is keeping us nice and safe from those drivers who are under the influence. They're under the influence of beauty. See a lot of people driving around, pointing their finger out the window at waterfalls and cliffs, and all of a sudden their car starts to swerve in that direction. So Sam's going to be keeping us nice and safe. It's always a pleasure to have him. We make a great team, in my opinion. Gatorade, you're good. Just be careful. Try not to pour that. We don't have time in between our tours to clean out the seats. We just load up the next group, so be really careful with that kind of stuff, guys. We're almost ready to take off. Everyone notice Anthony? Everyone say, "Hey, Anthony." He hooked you guys up, getting on here. And you notice he has a Junior Ranger badge. We do not age discriminate in Yosemite. Anyone can be a Junior Ranger. When I first started working for the Park Service, I was interning at Glacier National Park, and the first Junior Ranger I ever swore in was 81 years old. His goal was to be a Junior Ranger at every single national park. So you can all be Junior Rangers, and this is actually kind of the hardest thing that you have to accomplish on the entire worksheet, is going on a ranger-led program. So you can just check that right off the list. We're almost ready to take off here. Let's see, anything. I'm excited. We got a good group. We got some Michiganders. That's where I'm from. Yeah. I graduated from Central Michigan University last year. I came out here a week later. Are you fired up, Chips? Awesome. Yeah, I came out here a week later, and I haven't wanted to leave since. I did go home this past winter to hibernate. This is a seasonal gig. I was very cold, but I was sweet teaching and visiting family for the holidays, so I never know what's next, but it's always fun. So again, this is my second season here. I did spend a year at Glacier National Park. Has anyone been there? Anyone want to go there? It's a pretty awesome place. Better get there fast though. Our scientists think that those glaciers are going to be melted by 2020. They won't be gone. They will be big ice fields, but they won't act as a glacier, move like a glacier. By 2020 is what they predict. So, awesome! Yeah, we got our tickets. Please stay hydrated, guys. It is going to be a hot one today. So please stay hydrated and let me know if you ever feel uncomfortable. And well, all right, raise your hand if this is your first time to Yosemite. Wow. Raise your hand if you've been here before. More than once? More than twice? 5 times? Nice, wow, interesting. My first time to Yosemite was my first day of work last year. And whether it's your first time to the park or your 5th time to the park, I think we all have something in common. We all believe that Yosemite is a pretty special place. I've talked to visitors who their very first views of the valley have literally brought them to tears. I've also talked to people who've traveled all night long just to spend one day here in the park. Now, though some people are coming here to see wildlife, some are coming to see giant sequoia trees, I think that most of us are captivated by the scenery. That's what I want to tell you about today. I want to share with you the story behind that scenery. We have many human factors and many natural factors affecting that story that are very much like chapters in a book. And I'm just going to flip back and forth between the pages with you today and share some stories that I find really interesting about how this park became so special. My challenge to you as we're moving along is to think about how Yosemite has affected your story. To think about why you came out here. Was it the waterfalls for anyone? Did that pull you out here? Give yourself a pat on the back. In just a month from now, those waterfalls probably won't even exist. There will be nothing more than a trickle. When that snow's done melting, the waterfalls dry up, and people are asking me when we turn the waterfalls back on. So some people come here for waterfalls, some come for wildlife, but people are pulled here from all around the world for this lovely dirt parking lot and this campground. I'm just kidding. People are pulled here from all around the world to go rock climbing, but you can bet that many of those climbers are staying right here in Camp 4. Camp 4 is actually listed on the National Register of Historic Places for its significance that it's had in the development of rock climbing as a sport. It wasn't until the 1930s that people first attempted climbing these walls, and those were our true pioneers. They had hemp ropes, tennis shoes, soft pitons or spikes they would drive into the walls. It wasn't until the 50s that rock climbing really took off here, and it was already a really established sport all around the world, but walls like these had never been attempted before. And it's because of the stories shared around the campfire in Camp 4 that new equipment was developed and new styles of climbing came about. Now we have camming devices that the climbers could stick into the cracks and open up, and then as they make their way up, they can close them and bring them with them, rather than putting all of this equipment in the wall and hurting our rocks. So it's safer for them, better for our resource. Even today as I drive by, sometimes I see people going like this, or going like that, trying to show each other how they got past certain sections of the wall. Now, how many of you think these climbers are crazy? We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But coming up on your left here is Leidig Meadow and Sentinel Rock. To the right of Sentinel Rock, you can still see Sentinel Falls is still trickling down the side. Sentinel Falls didn't even exist when I got here last year, so this is the year of water for us. It's a good water year. Now, rock climbing is actually only the 4th most dangerous thing you can do here in Yosemite. The first most dangerous thing you can do here is what we are doing right now, driving. We have way more accidents with our drivers than anything else here. People speeding, turning blind corners, trying to pass each other on windy beds. The second most dangerous thing you can do here is hang out by water. I see lots of people climbing on the rocks by the lower Yosemite Falls and over by Vernal Falls. Every year we get slip, trip falls, broken bones, cracked skulls, or worse. Guys, this year we've already lost 2 people to the river. So please, please treat those areas like they're a highway. That is basically how I tell people to think of them. Now, the third most dangerous thing you can do here is go hiking. And the reason I think our hikers get into more accidents than our climbers is they're oftentimes very unprepared. I've seen people coming up the trail with no water or gear whatsoever, sometimes wearing flip-flops. So climbing is actually quite safe, and just like climbers are always trying to find their way up these rocks, the rocks are always trying to find their way down. If you look over on the right, and even some places on the left, you'll notice some large boulders lining the road. These boulders are from a large rockfall that happened here in 1987. An estimated 1.8 million tons of rock fell right here. Now, rock falls are the most influential geologic force shaping our valley today, and they're basically unpredictable. And that's why we've installed these on our tours. I'm just kidding. Do you think this could stop 1.8 million tons of rock? No. And I wouldn't joke about something like that if we would have had any injuries or any fatalities. But luckily enough for us, we had a road crew working in the area that witnessed several small rock falls off the tops of the cliffs, and they heard really loud cracking noises. So they were able to shut down the road and evacuate people in enough time to keep them nice and safe. Now, the way these rock falls happen is really eroded over long periods of time. One of the main ways is that there are these cracks in the walls, and water seeps down into the cracks, and in the winter time that water freezes. And what happens to water when it freezes? It expands and the cracks get larger, and then it melts and seeps deeper into the cracks, and we get this constant freeze-thaw process happening until something triggers that rock fall to come tumbling down. It could be heat, it could be a storm, it could be anything. We never know. So these are quite common. We have them every single year, multiple rock falls, so they may seem very scary. But I think that part of the charm of staying in the historic Curry Village is that you're sleeping next to some prehistoric boulders. Behind the historic Ahwahnee Hotel, there are rocks there that still have chalk marks left behind on them from some of our early climbers. And in the Camp 4, there's a large boulder there that fell that's been a challenge to climbers from all around the world. So just like these rocks tell us stories, we have many stories for them. I'd like to share with you a story about this rock that's peeking through the trees. In just a few moments, it's going to be coming up behind me. This rock is El Capitan. And I want to share with you a story of how El Capitan got its name. But not that name. The name before that. The name Tutakanula, named by the Awanichi people. Some of the very first people to establish permanent residency here in the valley. And the story goes something like this. A long, long time ago, there were two little bear cubs playing in the Merced River, splashing around all day long until they became very tired, and they decided to climb up on a big flat rock and take a nap. Now, I don't know what was going on with these little bear cubs, but they slept as that rock grew and grew and grew until they were all the way up there out of sight. Now, Mother Bear and the Valley animal people missed those little cubs dearly, so they all got together and decided they would try to retrieve them. First, Mouse tried hopping from rock to rock, but Mouse didn't make it very far. Fox and Deer tried, but they were unsuccessful. Mother Mountain Lion jumped the highest, but she just left these claw marks streaking down the side of the wall. Now, this whole time, there was one little inchworm, Tutakana, slowly making his way up the wall. Tutakana reached the top, retrieved those little bear cubs, and helped them navigate their way down by a silky strand he had left behind. So when Tutakana and those little cubs reached the valley floor, Mother Bear and the valley animal people were so happy that they rejoiced and decided to name the rock after that little inchworm. So Tutakanula means measuring worm stone. Now, how it got its name, El Capitan, it could have been a false interpretation of the Awanichi name thought to mean rock chief or rock captain, or somebody just thought that it sounded really cool. Sometimes we just don't know. That rock stands at over 3,500 feet from the valley floor up, and it has influenced climbers' stories from all around the world. Now, if we don't want to get too technical, there are two different kinds of climbing. There's aid climbing and there's free climbing. Being from Michigan, I didn't know anything about climbing before I came here. I thought that the only kind of climbing that existed was free climbing. That's when the climbers have a harness and ropes for safety, but they just use their hands and their feet to make their way up the wall. Aid climbing, this is more of an engineering feat. These climbers are using rope ladders, pulley systems. They're fastening tiny, tiny little bolts in the wall with clips and working their way up. The way I think about it, free climbing, more of a gymnastic feat, whereas aid climbing is more of a technical engineering feat. And with walls like El Capitan, oftentimes our climbers are using a combination of the two. Now, do you guys want to hold up your fingers for me and guess how many days you think it takes to make an average climber make their way to the top of El Capitan? 4 days, 5 days, 1 day, 8 days, Good guessing. 2 days. On average, it takes our climbers 3 to 5 days to make their way to the top. You guys want to guess the fastest climb? Less than a day. 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 46 seconds by Alex Honnold and Hans Florine. Now, climbers doing this, they are going up to the wall years in advance and just practicing certain sections, trying to get those moves down just perfect for when they do these climbs. Some of them will go as far as marking their route with chalk so that they never get confused where to put their hands and their feet next. And some will even go as far as dusting off the holes on the wall so they always have a perfect grip. So I believe they beat the time before that by only maybe 15 seconds or something like that. So a lot of people are good at this. I'm going to come back to climbing in just a moment, but over here on your left is the El Capitan Meadow. This big rock right here is the Middle Cathedral Rock. The rock to the right of it is the Lower Cathedral Rock, and the rocks to the left of it, these are the cathedral spires. Now, climbers will attempt these walls as well. Basically, any rock you see here is a climber is wondering how they're going to make their way to the top. Now, our climbers, they take such good care of themselves, and they take such good care of the resource that we don't even require them to use a permit system. They can just show up here and start climbing wherever, whenever they like. The only reason we may shut down a route is for extreme safety measures. Say there was a rock fall, our climbing rangers might go up and evaluate that route. Another reason would be for our peregrine falcons. Those are a species at risk here in the park, and climbing really disturbs them. They nest on the sides of the walls, so we will shut down many routes for them as well. Now I'm going to see if we can spot anyone from this angle. Some blue lower on the wall, but let me look at this guy for a minute and see if it moves. I've ever done associated with El Capitan is the El Cove swing. There's a cove at the base of El Capitan over to the right of it, and basically the climbers fasten a bolt and hang a rope down. They're not supposed to leave it there, but they do. I'm guilty. And they leave this rope hanging down, and the cove goes like this, and you stand back here, and the rope hangs down, and you connect it to your harness, and then you run off of the side of the cliff, and you swing out over the trees, and you swing back while you do flips, and it's so fun. And then you try to land it. If you don't land it, you have to lower yourself down and climb back up a little ways. It's really a lot of pressure because there's just this line of climbing dudes that know what they're doing. They're just watching you like, is she gonna land it? Because it takes so long to lower yourself down and climb back up to do it all over again. So it's a lot of pressure, but it's really fun. Now, like I said, I'm not a climber, but I do have lots of friends that climb. So at our first stop where we get out and stretch our legs, just come ask me if you have any other questions about climbing. Now, our stories and our climbers' stories wouldn't even be affected by Yosemite if it weren't for the amazing geologic forces that have shaped this place. Now, this is a story that only the land can tell. So in order to tell it, I'm going to flip back the pages to about 200 million years ago, where we had plate tectonics moving towards each other, and they collided. Now, one of these plates was heavier than the other one, so it sunk beneath. Now, as this plate sunk into the earth, it heated up and liquefied, turning into magma. That magma rose up and formed a series of volcanoes all across the Sierra Nevada. Now, before this magma ever reached the Earth's surface, it cooled and hardened over 150 million years, over a very slow period of time. This top continental layer was weathered away, leaving the granite exposed that we see today. So all of this used to be volcano. Now, a couple thousand years later, there was another uplift and a tilt. Imagine taking the river, lifting it up, and tilting it forward. All of the water that was collecting here was moving a lot faster. It was a lot more erosive, and it carved out this V-shaped valley. Any of you been to the Grand Canyon? Perfect example. Looking around, you're probably like, what is she talking about? This looks more like a box. And that's because of the glaciers that came through here. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment, but over here to your left are views of Bridal Veil Fall. What I want you to notice is the big U shape at the top of Bridal Veil Fall. Glaciers carve out U-shaped valleys. So this entire valley was full of a glacier. Up there, a tributary glacier came through. Glaciers are essentially giant, slow-moving rivers of ice. So think about how rivers are fed by creeks and streams. Up there was a tributary glacier or a creek glacier that came through and fed the larger glacier that was here in the valley. Now when we think about glaciers, we think about ice. But if you imagine an ice cube and a slab of granite going at each other like action figures, the granite's going to win. So don't think about glaciers as ice cubes. Imagine 2,000 feet of ice above your heads right now. It's so big that creek glaciers are coming in from the sides of the valley, filling it in. There's so much pressure that it's collapsing on itself and moving like a conveyor belt, just scraping along the valley cliffs like sandpaper, breaking rocks loose and taking it out with them. Now to really understand how a glacier changes a V-shaped valley into a U-shaped valley, I need to do a quick demonstration with you guys. I want you to turn to your neighbor and I want one of you to make a V-shape with your hands, just like this. The other person, you're going to make a fist. You're the glacier. Now don't set the glacier in the valley. Push the glacier through the bottom of the valley until the V. Did it work for you guys? That's called the Yosemite handshake. That's exactly what happened here. The glaciers just scrape along, completely reshaping how it looks. And looking around, if you've been to Glacier National Park or an other area where glaciers came through, this doesn't look like a typical U-shaped glacier carved valley. This looks more like a box. And that's because when the glaciers retreated here, there was a big lake, and then all this sediment was deposited, and it filled in that box. So we're driving around on all that sediment. Underneath us is that perfectly shaped U-shaped bedrock valley. So how our glaciers move, most of it's gravity. I like comparing things to food. That's the best way that I learn. So I want you guys to picture really, really thick blueberry pancake batter. Those blueberries are the boulders and the debris. That really, really thick batter, if you were to just place it on a surface, tilt it forward and watch it ooze along and fill in the cracks of whatever surface you had it on, that's how our glaciers move. They're just being pulled down the valley by gravity. Another thing that helps them move is that there's so much pressure underneath them that it changes the melting point of water. Think of when you go ice skating. You leave this thin line of water behind you. Your ice skate wasn't hot. That's not how it melted the ice. There was so much pressure underneath it that it melted the ice. There's so much pressure under the glaciers that you get this thin layer of water which helps them move and scrape upon. Now the water has been in effect shaping this place way longer than the glaciers. It doesn't always get as much credit as I think it oftentimes deserves. But the way I think about it is I'm Ranger Rachel, I'm the water. Ranger Sam comes along, he's the glacier. Ranger Sam gets a lot done a lot faster than me. I still do my job, but I do it a lot more slowly. So I think that's what happened here. The glaciers were here for such a short period of time. It made so much change that they get all the credit for how this place looks. Now this geologic story isn't finished. Our geologists have measurements of our valley cliffs rising 2 to 3 millimeters each year. This has changed now because of the major drought that we're going through. Imagine taking a large man off of a trampoline. We're taking all this water weight off of our plates, allowing them to move around a lot more freely. Now, I don't know if that means Yosemite is rising or sinking, but we'll find out in the near future. And just like our rocks are always changing, so is our water. And that's what I'm going to talk about next, but this is our first stop. This is the only restroom break on the entire tour. So if you need to use the restroom, please do so first and then come check out the view. Restrooms are just across the street in this little outhouse. Please look out for the cars, guys. They're not looking out for you. If you want to go down by the water, I recommend going back in the shade by where that big boulder is. We'll get that central AC going for you in just a moment. Okay, everybody look to your left and look to your right. Do we have everyone? Nobody's waving their arms and shouting, so I think we're good. I do want you to check out this sign on our way out. Pretty hard to imagine. Could be all the way up here to about my hat brim. It was the highest flood in our park's history. It was 1996, New Year's Eve, and none of our staff or any of our visitors had a clue what was coming because they were all celebrating the holiday. Little did they know there was a Pineapple Express coming. Pineapple Express is a weather pattern that comes from the southwest over the Pacific Northwest or California, usually bringing really warm temperatures and a lot of precipitation. So at elevations like 9,000 feet, where we would almost always get our precipitation in the form of snow, especially that time of year, it was coming down as rain. So it was raining on the snow, the really warm temperatures were melting the snow, and it started to shoot off the valley cliffs in the form of slush. Now this was a tragedy to the people here, and I was reading the other day an article from CNN during the time that was saying that it looked like trailers were just bathtub toys, just floating away. Bridges were knocked loose. Sewage lines knocked loose, contaminants spilling in the water. Where we started at the Yosemite Lodge, the entire first floor had flooded. Campgrounds were washed away that we're still trying to repair today. Congress had given us over $197 million in repairs. The park, the valley, was closed for months. Now, this was a tragedy to everyone who was here. It was really expensive, it was really scary, but floods are actually good for the land. They redistribute rocks and soil and sand. They change wildlife's habitat. It's kind of like cleaning house, where you just get to start over fresh. You wipe everything clean and start over new. So after that, we really had to start thinking about how we were going to manage the water. And I will come back to that in just a moment, but over here on your right is the smallest waterfall in Yosemite, Fern Spring. Fern Spring. Did you see people filling up their water bottles there? I also see people changing their babies there. So filter your water, people. Filter your water. I have lots of friends that drink the water here, and it is probably very clean. You've got the granite filtering that out, but there's always that tiny chance that you could get a bug. So please filter your water when you come to Yosemite. Now, after the flood of '97 and many that followed, we really had to start thinking of how we were going to manage the river, how we were going to manage our water. How far should we be placing infrastructure from the water? What types of activities should we be having near or in the river? So we started developing the Merced River Plan. Those of you who are local or who maybe have been coming here for years may be familiar with it. We've been formulating this plan over a really long time, and just this year it's going into effect. So if you come back later in the season, you may see construction being done in or near the river. You're going to notice a couple things aren't here that used to be. We're moving buildings away from the water. We don't have horseback riding in the valley like we used to because those horses had all this impact on the water. The reason we have these plans is because we need the river to heal itself. Rivers are dynamic. They're always changing. You can't tell them where to go, and that's something that we've been doing. We've been telling this river where to go. And when we look at historic photographs, you can see that the river has literally doubled in width in places. There isn't as much vegetation holding it in on the sides. There aren't as many willow trees on the side of the river, and there aren't as many downed logs in the river as there used to be. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself, though. This is a chapter in Yosemite story that's still being written. I'm going to flip back the pages and kind of skip through the chapters of human history to give you an idea of how Yosemite even became a protected place at all. How do we even get these opportunities to manage our water in this park? Now, our archaeologists have found evidence of people traveling through Yosemite up to 10,000 years ago. And there's also evidence of people permanently living in the park up to 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Now, many of these people were of southern Miwok descent, although there are many unions between the Mono Lake Paiute tribes from the east as well because of trade. Now, these people were hunter-gatherers and had cultures rich in tradition, religion, political affiliation, song, and dance. And a very peaceful chapter for them ended so swiftly. In 1848, there are an estimated 2,000 Caucasian people in the state of California. By the end of 1849, there are an estimated 53,000 Caucasian people in this state. This huge huge spike of people in such a short period of time can be described in one word what they were searching for. Gold. The gold rush. We had all these people coming out west in hopes of getting rich and finding gold. Now, unfortunately, these people were coming from the east where they already had a couple decades of prejudice under their belts against the native tribes. So they had it really rough when they came out here. They cut down their trees, burned their villages, took many of their women as wives and as slaves. And the only thing the native people could think to do was to fight back, even though they were completely outnumbered. And this began the start of the Mariposa Indian War. Very shortly after, the state of California organized the Mariposa Battalion to put an end to that war, which they did so very swiftly, closing this chapter of peace for the people of the land and opening up a new one where they were being exploited and that resource was heavily suffering. Now, before I move on to that next chapter, I do want to make something very clear. These people are still here today, many of them living in the local communities, and I highly encourage you to check out the Indian Culture Museum if you get a chance, and you can talk to some demonstrators who would love to share stories with you of their ancestors and would love to share stories that I'm not even able to share with you. Now, moving on to this next chapter, in my opinion, a very sad chapter in Yosemite's story. We had all these livestock grazing in the meadow, trees being cut down, bears being shot left and right. We had all these artists and writers and photographers traveling to this park, trying to spread the fame of it with the rest of the world. And it worked. First, people trickled in on foot and horseback, and then later by stagecoach. And that resource was heavily suffering. We had our first entrepreneur, James Hutchings, who saw this place as a great opportunity for the tourism industry. So he built hotels and started writing articles about it to try to get more people out here. We had even planted apple orchards in the park that are still here today. Now, there's one man that came out here, and I don't think this man gets enough credit for what he did. I think that some people could almost argue that if it weren't for him, we may not have some of the protected places that we do today. And I had never even heard of him before I came out here. His name was Captain Israel Raymond Ward. Now, Captain Ward came out here with a tourist party, and he fell in love with the valley. And he was very alarmed at the way it was being treated. So he wrote a letter about it to his senator, Senator John Kness, and in the letter he enclosed one of the very first photographs ever taken of Yosemite. And he wrote about how this place was too special and about how it needed to be protected. Senator Kness agreed with him, so he forwarded his letter to the Commissioner of the General Land Office to devise a piece of legislation, then introducing the Yosemite Grant. Now, the Yosemite Grant was passed and signed into law in 1864. What was happening here in 1864? The Civil War. It was the bloodiest year of our Civil War, and President Abraham Lincoln still thought it was important enough to sign the Yosemite Grant. This was the first time that any government had set aside a place just for the scenic values and for people to recreate. You'll go to other parks that may argue that they were the first protected place, but oftentimes it was to hold that resource for later use. If you go to any national park, you'll see rangers wearing this uniform. And something you can notice is that on their headbands there are gold cones, and there are cones on their bands and on their belts. These are sequoia cones. Those are there to remind everyone where this idea of preservation started. It started right here in Yosemite. Now, we're not positive, but it's very likely that President Lincoln had a photograph on his desk when he signed the Yosemite Grant. And if he did have that photo on his desk, it would be this view over to your right. This is our second stop, so don't worry, we'll have plenty of time to take pictures. That plane is very low. I don't like when they're taking up that airspace. Hurry up, get out of here. Yeah. Just imagine while you're here, just traveling for weeks or months on foot or horseback, coming over this hill, and that would be the very first view you would get of the valley. I'll let you guys know when you can exit. I'll let you know when that step comes down. I will have cups available for you, so please drink water, please stay hydrated. Again, we'll have a little bit of time here to take pictures. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and you're free to exit.
Very important.
Sam's coming around, wallets, looking for wallets. Please do not litter. If I see those little cups on the side of the road, I will be a very sad ranger. Now these views too as we come around. Put on your best smile, even though we've got this amazing spectacle right here. Oftentimes we are the spectacle for the cameras, for the paparazzi. Alright, so this waterfall is Bridalveil Fall. To the left and stacked on top of each other are the lower, middle, and upper cathedral rocks. In between the lower and the middle cathedral rock, you can see a dome in the distance. That's Sentinel Dome. And then to the left of that is Half Dome. To me, oftentimes it looks like a dolphin jumping out of the water. To the left of Half Dome is Cloud's Rest. And then way over here is El Capitan, of course. Now just imagine what this view might look like if the park weren't protected. Can you picture zip lines? Maybe condos? Some flashing rainbow lights at night lighting up Half Dome? Maybe a Starbucks, some casinos? This wasn't the first national park, but it was the first protected land. Do you guys know your trivia what the first national park was? Yellowstone. Good job. You guys know your stuff. Yellowstone, the way it became a national park though was kind of by mistake. They saw all these geysers and this beautiful country and they said, hey, we need to protect that place just like they did out in California. But at the time, Wyoming wasn't a state, so there wasn't anyone to give it to protect it. So they said, I guess we're all just going to have to protect it and call it a national park. Which is really funny to me because in my opinion, this is one of America's best ideas. And it kind of happened on accident. So here, just the valley and the Mariposa Grove were protected by the state of California. And as time went on, we were traveling to that surrounding area and up to the high country, and we really realized that area needed to be protected as well. But California didn't have the funding or the manpower to protect that surrounding area, but they also didn't want to give up the valley or the Mariposa Grove. So what we ended up having was a park within a park. So bear with me, let's think of food again. Picture that jelly donut. The jelly is the valley and the Mariposa Grove that's protected under the Yosemite grant by the state of California. The surrounding donut is the rest of Yosemite, and that's protected as a national park. Now California wasn't doing a very good job protecting the jelly portion of that donut. There were still bears being shot. There was livestock grazing in the meadows. Trash that they couldn't keep up with. There was a pigsty in Cook's Meadow. This isn't the kind of park that you want to see, and it wasn't the kind of park that John Muir wanted to see either. So John Muir started writing about it, and his ideas of preservation and how this place should be protected became very popular. And one very important man read what he had to say, and that was President Theodore Roosevelt. Now President Roosevelt was intrigued, so he wrote a letter to John Muir asking him if he would take him on a camping trip and show him around Yosemite. And John Muir replied with a no. That's right. John Muir said no to the President of the United States. He already had a trip planned to Asia to study some giant trees there, and apparently the President's request wasn't a good enough reason for him to want to stay. I don't have the President's note in front of me right now. I'm really going to paraphrase along the lines of what he wrote back. It went something like this. You know, you don't get that many chances to spend time like this with the President of the United States. And also, when the President asks you to do something, it's not so much a request as it's an order. So I'll see you soon. So with some convincing from the President and John Muir's friends, he finally accepted his request and told him he would stay. And they had a great time. The very first night of their trip, they stayed in the Mariposa Grove under the giant sequoia trees. The second night they spent up at Glacier Point, where the president woke up with 6 inches of snow on his blankets. He wasn't too bothered though, because he made his guards carry around 40 army blankets with him everywhere that he went. The third and final night, they spent right around here in a meadow by Bridal Veil Fall. They weren't even supposed to stay here that night. They were actually supposed to stay in the old Yosemite Village, and the president totally changed his plans. I'm going to come back to that story in just a moment, but we're going to be getting a couple views peeking through the trees here of Bridal Veil Fall. These are going to be last views of Bridal Veil. We oftentimes believe it got its name because when it blows around in the wind, it looks like a veil over a bride's face. And I was telling people I kind of do like later in the season when it starts to dry up a little bit because the wind is blowing it everywhere. Yeah, look at it go. And then behind me, you guys notice that heart shape that I was trying to point out to you earlier with the climber? Point out to your neighbor if you see the heart. Every so often in the past, we'll have a climber girl who falls in love with a climber boy, and they'll go up there with a climber priest and they'll get married in the heart on the side of El Capitan. Can I get an aww? Yep, there it is again. And then also you can see Ribbon Fall is still coming down. Still coming down over there. Now you do not have to be a rock climber, and over here, awesome views of Bridal Veil you're about to have again. You do not have to be a climber to make it to the top of El Capitan. I did my first solo backpacking trip this year, and I hiked all along the ridge up and stayed on El Capitan, and then hiked down. So you do not have to climb to get to the top. You can backpack. I believe my trip was 20 miles. I think the shortest trip, if you were trying to do it as a day hike, would still be about 16 miles. Now coming back to my story of John Muir and President Roosevelt, that third night, there was a big crowd awaiting the president's arrival. All these fireworks ready to go off, a big banquet planned, all these festivities. And the president was riding down into the valley on horseback, and he was not happy with what he saw. He wanted a true wilderness experience. So he turned around and sought out refuge in a tiny cabin and said, "To Bridal Veil Fall!" And he ditched his own party. The fireworks never went off. The banquet never happened. People weren't too happy with the president. But that night was very important because on that night, John Muir had the president's undivided attention as he not only lobbied for wilderness places in Yosemite, but wilderness places all across the country. And the president was very active in protecting our nation's lands after that. He protected thousands and thousands of acres of land under federal reserves, created 18 national monuments, was very active in the creation of 5 more national parks, and after that night we got the presidential signature on a bill that was passed that incorporated the jelly into the surrounding donut, making this entire place a national park. So we like to see John Muir here as this true wilderness hero, but I think because of that we oftentimes forget that he was kind of crazy. I have a couple stories about John Muir. My favorite one is when he hiked out into the middle of a meadow right before a storm. He climbed up to the top of a tree and roped himself in, and as the storm was happening, he swayed back and forth with the tree just to see what it would feel like to be a tree. Another time he hiked up to the upper Yosemite Falls, and not on a trail that we use today. He made his own path, and he climbed up on this lone standing rock and looked up at the waterfall, and all of a sudden the wind shifted and blew gallons and gallons of freshly melted snow water directly on his head as he held onto that rock for dear life for a couple of minutes until the wind finally shifted and blew it back to its original position. I've got another story, but I do want you guys to be peeking up in the valley cliffs here on this middle cathedral rock. Sometimes we do see climbers. Sometimes we see them, so be looking. Let's see here. It is pretty sunny right now in this section, so I'm not sure if we'll get any. Do you see one? Right on the crack system right here? No. Yeah, I don't see them. This big crack right here is a really popular route for climbers, but it's probably too hot in the morning. They'll probably do it in the afternoon when the shade comes over this section of the wall. Oh well, we tried. Well, there's other stories of John Muir slowly crawling across giant slabs of granite. Thank you. Trying to imitate what it would be like to be a glacier. So I like to imagine John Muir and President Roosevelt climbing up rocks, crawling across them, or climbing up trees. But for my own personal amusement, I like to picture how that would be today with the President Obama's most recent visit. Everyone asked me if I got to meet the family, but I did not. We are very honored to have had them visit, but my bosses did. They were stationed along the 4-mile trail as they hiked down from Sentinel Dome. So they were here for 2 days. They were here for the weekend. Yep. I believe they stayed at the historic Ahwahnee, the Majestic Hotel, and they flew right into Ahwahnee Meadow.